Speech language pathologists are leaving their jobs left and right, and a lot of them are leaving the profession as a whole. There is a huge problem right now with SLP turnover, and there's a lot of factors that go into it, but we're going to tackle today what some of these problems are and why we are seeing such a high SLP turnover, and then we're going to talk about some solutions. So I've got some real practical tips for you guys today to help transform your speech teams into teams that are working really well and everyone feels supported and everyone has the tools that they need to thrive in this job. Because we all got into this profession because we wanted to help children or teens or whoever we're helping, not because we wanted to be burned out. So I am Carrie Clark. This is the Speech and Language Kids podcast. I am the creator of the SLK curriculum, a complete curriculum for speech and language therapy, covering all the areas that we cover for pediatric therapy. So let's dive into what is going on here. Why are we seeing such a high turnover for speech language pathologists? And if you are a speech language pathologist, you probably already know these things. But here's the nitty gritty. Here's what it really breaks down to. SLPs are not leaving because they don't love the work. We love working with these kids. We love helping these kids. SLPs are leaving because the system is asking too much of them. The system that serves these children, our educational systems, our medical systems, all of these systems are broken. And each SLP is having to fix the system all by themselves for each and every client that they see. So when we talk about SLP turnover, the conversation usually goes straight to pay, straight to caseload size, workload balance. And yes, all of those are absolutely a part of this. But the underlying problem here is that SLPs are burning out because they're being asked to carry the weight of an entire system individually. When we have clinicians forced to constantly reinvent therapy, second guessing their goals, defending their decisions without some sort of a shared framework or a system, then we see the burnout, even if these are well paid, even if they don't have a huge caseload. So yes, pay is important. Yes, caseload is important, but we're looking at a bigger issue here. Teachers, classroom teachers, are handed curriculums. They say, hey, somebody did the research and found that this is a super effective way to help kids develop in this area. We've done all the work for you. Just run this program, right? And I know it's more complicated than that. I have plenty of friends that are teachers, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. But imagine if each teacher had to reinvent a way to teach reading to every child in their classroom every year, right? SLPs are told, hey, this child is struggling and we don't know why and we don't know what would help them. So you just go ahead and come up with a brand new system just for this client. And oh, hey, here's 87 other children you need to do the exact same thing for, right? And yes, I know that speech language therapy has to be individualized. We all know this. But we too have research that shows super effective ways for children to learn speech and language skills. We have this just like teachers have this. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for every child because we already have a ton of great ways that work. We don't need to be putting this much decision fatigue on our SLPs. And this is where we can really make a huge difference in SLP turnover, in SLP job satisfaction, by creating systems that do the heavy lifting. And then even if the SLP does need to tweak it for a child, we're still not starting from scratch, okay? So let's zoom out a little bit. We're going to look at the reasons that people do leave their jobs, the reasons that SLPs are saying that they leave their jobs. Caseloads are too big. So not enough pay for the amount of stress, right? We all feel that one. Not enough support or training. Work spills into nights and weekends. We have so much workload that we don't have time to get it all done at school or at work. And then the behaviors, the client behaviors, student behaviors, feeling hard to manage. We are not necessarily given the tools that we always need to be able to support that, right? But if we really look at what each of these issues is telling us, it comes down to structure. There's not enough structure. There's not enough support in how do we make these decisions on what to work on with each student. How do we justify this goal? Does this child still need to be in speech therapy services? When do we dismiss? When do we move back to the classroom? Am I doing too much? Am I doing not enough? And why does this feel so hard, right? It's too many decisions, not enough structure, and not enough guidance. And that constant cognitive load is what burns people out. I have seen SLPs with large caseloads that have systems in place that make it feel manageable. And I have seen SLPs with small caseloads that don't have systems in place who feel like they are drowning. And so it really comes down to, how do we put a system in place that supports all of this so we're not getting that decision fatigue, we're not having that huge cognitive load that makes it so draining, okay? So what we want to think about is, this isn't just, we're not just adding more support. We need to add systems, okay? More professional development without a shared workflow just means more ideas. It does not mean more clarity, right? How many times have you gone to a professional development thing and you saw a presentation, you go, wow, those are great ideas, but there's no way, like, you're not sure how to put that into what you're currently doing. Where does that fit? And so we end up with this just constant, okay, well, let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. And we're just throwing a bunch of activities at the child, but not necessarily moving them forward. Same with materials, right? Oh, okay, well, schools could provide more resources and materials to their therapists. Yes, but if you don't have a system behind it, it's just more overwhelm. That's more things for them to go through. We scroll through Teachers Pay Teachers and go, oh, that one looks cute. I'll try that. But it's just more paperwork, more pieces to keep track of, to keep organized, to print and laminate and all of the things. And then even giving more autonomy. Hey, you do it your way. That's fine. If we're giving autonomy without guardrails, then that just leads to more second guessing, less confidence, and again, more decision fatigue, more overwhelm. So our SLPs, we don't need to be told to work harder or to care more. We need fewer decisions that we have to make and a clearer path to how those decisions are made. Okay, so the actual solution here is a structured system of care. The programs with the lowest turnover don't rely on amazing, we just have better clinicians than anyone else. No, they rely on systems. So what we need in order to reduce turnover and increase job satisfaction are clear workflows of how therapy works, decision guides that help with therapy planning, and a shared model across the whole team. Everyone on the team using the same model of, here's how we qualify kids. Here's what we do before we qualify kids. Here's what we do as they're getting therapy. Here's what we do after they're done with therapy. It doesn't remove clinical judgment, okay? We're still having our SLPs making the decisions that human beings need to make, but we're supporting them by having a framework for those decisions that makes it easy to make the decisions that need to be made and then move a child through this process in an efficient way, so that we're not just, okay, well, they qualified, so now they're just going to be in speech therapy for years, right? We want to make sure that we are making the best use of everyone's time, including the child's, and giving them the tools they need to get back into their everyday activities, okay? So let's look at how we can create a structured therapy system to reduce that turnover and increase the job satisfaction. So like I said at the beginning, I have our SLK curriculum, and this is the core of what we've been doing at Speech and Language Kids and what we've been building for the last several years. It is a decision-making infrastructure, and yes, there are materials included, but that's not the point. It's not a library. It is a framework. And so if we create these kinds of systems, if you use something like our curriculum, then we can find ways to make the decision-making easier and help children move through the process. So when you have a structured therapy system, therapy planning becomes faster and easier, okay? So instead of reinventing goals and plans for every student, we can have a framework where we say, okay, if the child is struggling in this, here are a couple different paths we can take. We choose the one that is most suited to what they need. We customize it to their level, and we're ready to go. So instead of saying, okay, here's a whole bunch of testing and assessment data, good luck, write a goal, we can look at it and say, okay, we already know here are the different paths that we can take children down depending on what they're struggling with. Let's find which path makes the most sense for this student. And that's what our curriculum does. We have our screening checklists, allow you to get information from teachers and parents and assessment data, compile it all together and say, okay, which of these paths makes the most sense? Each of our paths or curriculums has beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So you can customize it to the specific level of that child. And then within that, you customize the goal to what percentage of accuracy you expect them to achieve by the end of the year. So it's all very structured, but it also has room for customization and individualization. I like to think of it as a choose your own adventure novel where you read through and then it says, okay, is it like this or this? Turn to page 32. And then you turn to 32 and you read and it says, okay, now is it like this or this, right? And so we're making decisions with this, I guess, a decision tree, choose your own adventure novel, whichever analogy works for you. But it's not just having to come up with a new goal for every student every time. We are looking at these evidence-based curriculums, evidence-based pathways that we know work to support children with speech and language development issues, and we're just finding the right path. That is so much simpler on a clinical decision-making guide perspective than trying to come up with a goal from scratch, okay? This is especially helpful if we have new SLPs or SLPs who are new to our team and maybe just aren't familiar with the way we do things. If we have these in place for our teams where we can say, hey, this is how we do this. This is how we, select our goals and choose skills to work on. It's going to boost the outcomes and reduce that cognitive load. Okay. Also, fewer nights and weekends working because that's all been made for you. Okay, the next way that this is helpful is that our therapy sessions are going to be more effective when the therapy plan is already laid out, okay? So a lot of times what happens is we say, okay, we made a goal, this child's gonna work on figurative language. And then our SLPs are always scrambling for random activities to do to support figurative language. So we say, okay, I got this one on Teachers Pay Teachers and we work on this. Oh, I saw this thing on Instagram, so I'll try that today. And it's just a series of random activities, but it doesn't necessarily lead to progress, right? We've all felt that where we feel like we're just kind of filling a gap. We're kind of babysitting. But we can, if we have a structured plan in place where we say, okay, we know the student needs to work on figurative language. Here's how we step them through that process. Here's how we introduce the skill. Here's how we start to practice it. Here's how we scaffold them up. And here's how we get to mastery. It is a structured step-by-step plan that, especially if you're using our curriculum, all you have to do is grab the packet, print it out and drop it in the student folder, and you have all those activities ready to go in the order that makes the most sense for the student to learn them, okay? This also reduces our behavior challenges because the therapy is better matched to their skill level. Remember, we went through this flow and we said, okay, are they beginner, intermediate, and advanced? If we've dialed that in, then we know that the therapy that we're doing is matched to their level. And if we're following a structured plan, then the first activity they do is going to be the very easiest version of that skill. And then we step them through progressively so that they are successful all the way through. We're not asking them to do the hard skill right at the beginning. We're giving them an easier version and scaffolding them up. This is how curriculums work for reading and math and science and social studies, right? We're just doing the same thing over on the speech language therapy side. All right. Okay. The other piece that these structured frameworks can really help with, or the workflows, however you want to think of it, is that not every student needs, no student needs to be lingering in speech therapy for years, right? What we need is a structured way to move children into therapy and back out of therapy as they don't need it anymore. And if we can put those workflows in place where we say, okay, everybody gets tier 1, that's our regular education, everybody gets their education. If a child is struggling and meets these requirements, boop, 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 we move them to tier 2. We add tier 2 on. And then we do these things. And then if they're still struggling, then we move to direct speech and language therapy services. But we're only doing that for a temporary amount of time to get them the skills that they're missing. And then we push them right back in to tier 1 and tier 2 to make sure they're carrying those skills over. And what that does, by specifying specific beginning and end points for when the speech language pathologist is actually serving those children directly, We're making sure that children are not lingering in therapy where they're missing out on class time, they're missing out on extra activities, and the SLPs are seeing kids that don't necessarily need to be seen in that setting. We can be supporting them in other ways, in the classroom, in small group, in RTI programs, right? And so when we have these mapped out and these workflows put together, then we can empower our SLPs to make better decisions about who needs to be seen and who would benefit more from just having support in their classroom, right? So all of this can happen more effectively if we put some guardrails, if we put some processes in place. And of course, this should be dictated by the SLPs on the ground floor saying, hey, this is what we're seeing. But once we put those systems in place, then every therapist that comes in, even if it's a new therapist, will have that information about how and when we do this, okay? Another great way that we can use our systems and our workflows is to better use SLPAs and instructional staff effectively, right? If we have all these systems in place, then we can figure out how to use an SLPA, which is a speech language pathology assistant, to deliver some of these services. We can even look at using classroom aides or instructional aides, instructional staff to be delivering tier 2 supports to children. We have our core language program inside my SLK curriculum. It is a 16-week oral language intervention that explicitly teaches oral language skills for one grade level in 16 weeks. So that's about half a school year. So in one school year, an IA could run a small group of students through 2 grade levels of this program, get them caught up in those language skills. And for some children, that's enough. That's what our whole MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, that's how all of this is supposed to work, right? If the student is struggling with tier 1, the basic education, then we can give them some extra support, maybe a small group run by an instructional aide using a structured program. And that's going to be effective for most of those kids. And then we just have a small percentage of kids who actually have some sort of a language disorder or delay and need explicit services from the speech language pathologist, or services from an SLPA with a speech language pathologist doing the decision making, doing the oversight and the supervision. All right. So if we have structured plans in place and workflows and systems, then we can make better use of SLPAs and instructional staff to make sure every student, every client gets supported without overburdening any one piece of the system. And then finally, when we have a framework, when we have a system like this in place, clinicians are going to feel more supported and not isolated, right? Support isn't just, oh, well, they have someone they can ask questions to. It's having these shared frameworks, having common language to talk about these things and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. And they go, oh, did you check out this curriculum? That sounds like what you need. It is a focus on how these decisions are made effectively and how we can support each other and have a whole team working from the same system, the same shared vocabulary. All right. So that is the big picture here, guys. This is how we reduce the SLP turnover, how we reduce the SLP burnout. We can't afford to lose good therapists. There are so many children that need these supports. There are so many teens that are struggling, and we have the tools to do it, but we are so burned out that we are not able to make this work. And so if we want to reduce that SLP turnover, the answer is not just smaller caseloads, better pay. It's giving our teams a clear, defensible, shared way to make clinical decisions. So if you are an SLP, if you're an individual, you can access all of the resources that I was talking about, our shared process of how you make these clinical decisions, our curriculums, our goal packets that have all the materials already laid out. All of that is at hub.speechandlanguagekids.com. But if you are a program director, if you are leading a team, if you're an SLP lead, then you guys can access this for your whole team through our Teams program. So if you go to speechandlanguagekids.com/team, you can find our resources on our membership discounts for larger groups, and then how we can support your team in having this shared system, this shared workflow, and have these decisions easier to make, more defensible, right? More effective. And then that's going to lead to that lower turnover, better outcomes for therapy, all the things that we want for our SLP teams. So we would love to talk to you. If you would like to sign up for a team program, you can go to that website, or you can just email me, Carrie@speechandlanguagekids.com. That's Carrie. And then, yes, for our regular individual SLPs, then you can access those resources at hub.speechandlanguagekids.com, or share this with your supervisor and see if you can get your whole team on board, because this really is more effective if we're all using the same framework, as opposed to everyone kind of coming up with their own thing. All right. Hope that was helpful. Let us know what questions you have, and we'll see you next time on the Speech and Language Kids podcast. Bye for now.